Chazaq, and welcome to the inaugural talk on the series for improving, transforming our relationships. I'd like to share with you in this series some very practical things that we can do to help improve the quality of relationships, particularly with people who are difficult, because relationships are difficult. It is a few and far between, probably the rare exception that is effortless, and even those take effort, so they all require work. But that doesn't mean that they can't be rewarding, and it doesn't mean that you can't do things that can drastically improve the quality of the relationship and your life. Because here's the thing, in more than going on 3 decades of doing this kind of work, I found that a person's emotional health and the quality of the relationships are inextricably linked. Right? And if you think about the people in your life who are generally emotionally healthier, they have good relationships. And if you think about those people who have less good relationships, their emotional health is not so ideal. Now, of course, it's a chicken and the egg. If you have poor relationships, then it's likely you're not going to be feeling great about yourself and doing great things and really maximizing your potential. At the same time, if you're not feeling good about yourself, then it makes it much more difficult for you to be around other people. You may be much more difficult. It may make it hard for you to connect. Not may, it does. And we're going to go ahead and flesh out the psychology. And there's so many areas that we're going to explore. We can talk about how to deal with criticism, particularly with somebody who's very sensitive. We're going to be talking about the role of guilt. Not a good idea, by the way. We're going to be talking certainly about shalom bias, improving our marital relationships. I think one of the biggest areas where we get the most bang for our buck is with children, because in parenting at any age, regardless of how old our children are, there are still things that we can do to affect the quality of the relationship and, believe it or not, their emotional health. It's just very exciting, and I want to give a big shout out and a thank you to Chazaq for helping to organize all of this, Torah Anytime for their extraordinary work, Chickens for Shabbos, who literally save people's lives every single day. So some great organizations behind this, and I'm very excited to go ahead and to share some ideas in transforming relationships. So with that Hagdam, with that introduction in mind, I'm just, by the way, since it's the first one, I'm working out some kinks, and I'm noticing the bookshelf behind me by other speakers. They're filled with nice farm and some pictures, and it looks like mine is the kids section of Barnes & Noble. But okay, be that as it may. Let's begin with the following. A guy walks into a bar, orders a shot of whiskey, takes a shot of whiskey, takes the glass, throws it through the plate glass window, shatters it completely. The bartender says, "Come on, what are you doing?" The guy says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I feel so awful. I feel so guilty. I feel so ashamed. I don't know what happened." Bartender says, "Okay, it's all right. It happens." Next day, the guy walks into the bar, asks for a drink, orders a shot of whiskey. The bartender's looking at him really askew and hoping it doesn't happen again. But guy takes a drink, puts a glass down, bartender breathes a sigh of relief. Then the guy picks up the glass, throws it through the window again, shatters it completely. Comes back in the third day. Once again, it's got all this blue tape up. For whatever reason, people who fix things use blue tape. And he's got a brand new mirror. So he goes and orders his shot of whiskey again. Bartender says, "Let's make sure this doesn't repeat itself." The guy said, "No problem." Guy sits down, takes a drink, puts it down, takes a glass, throws it through, shatters it again. Bartender says, "That's it, you're done. You're not coming back in here until you get help. Go see Lieberman, go talk to somebody. Until you are cured, I do not want you coming back in here." The guy holds his head down, says fine, he walks out completely embarrassed. 1 full year later, he walks into the bar, a new man, head held high, orders a shot of whiskey. Bartender gives him a knowing glance. The guy orders a shot of whiskey, takes the drink, puts the glass down. Then he picks it up and he throws it and shatters the window again. The bartender said, "Come on, enough. What happened?" "I told you I did not want you in here until you went and got yourself some help." The guy said, "But I did get help. I went to therapy for a full year." The bartender says, "Yeah, but you're still throwing glasses through my window." The guy says, "Yeah, but now I don't feel guilty about it anymore." The goal of a good therapist, the goal of a good friend, a good rabbi, a rebbitzin, somebody close to us, is not to make us feel differently, it's to act differently. In other words, to do what's wrong and simply not feel bad about it doesn't move a person forward. At the same time, ensconcing ourselves with guilt and shame and wrapping ourselves up in this blanket of self-pity, it says, I'm so lousy, I'm so awful, I'm so terrible, I don't deserve anything better, doesn't move us forward either. I want to share with you, we're going to be sharing with you a number of number one secrets. So this is one of a series of number one. Didn't do well in math. Number one is this: you do not move people forward by laying on the guilt. Guilting someone into doing something never works. In the short term, you may get some mild cooperation, but the objective is not, see, here's the thing. Let's take a child, for instance. You want a child to do something and they're not listening to you. Hypothetically, it doesn't happen in my house, but maybe in yours it does. Child is not listening. And you tell the child what you're doing is wrong, okay? 3 things are happening here. All bad. Number one is the child begins to get more angry with you, dislikes you, because you are causing him pain. You are causing him to feel less good about himself. Call it toxic shame, call it guilt. We're going to go ahead and unwind what the definitions are another time. But whatever it is, you're bringing out a behavior in me that's bad, makes me feel less. Makes me feel less worthy of connection, makes me feel less lovable. So now I'm mad at you, and I feel less about me. And the entire time I'm sitting there coming up with all the rationalizations, justifications, reasons as to why it is I'm right and you're wrong. See, human beings are going to justify our behavior. We've got this thing called cognitive dissonance, where there's 2 dissonant different ideas. I want to see myself as a good person, yet I'm doing something that's wrong. In order to bridge that gap, if I don't do tshuva, I don't do what's right, I'm going to have to unleash a number of defense mechanisms. We've got rationalization, we've got justification, we've got blame, minimization. There's a whole range of them, and we'll get into them another time. But for now, what I'm going to do, or that child is going to do, is they're now going to explain away their behavior. So by making somebody feel bad for what they've been doing, they're mad at you, they're mad at themselves, and they're justifying their behavior. So very nice, you're thinking very good. I can never criticize, I can never go ahead and tell anyone that they're doing something wrong. No. For those of you thinking that, we've got a whole other conversation for you. You're extrapolating a generality from something specific. But in this case, there are definitive ways that you can go ahead and help to move the person forward, and we're going to cover them, by the way, right now. But before we do, we'll cover them in a few minutes, bleed netter, is that when a person does something that's wrong, particularly a child or a spouse, here is the biggest mistake that we do. You make them feel worse for doing it. Forget about an actual behavior you want to correct. This is a no-brainer. You could have gone ahead and did what I asked you. You missed a mitzvah. You could have gone, you take out the garbage, you listened to so-and-so. You missed out an opportunity. What are you thinking? Nobody wants to think of themselves as bad. Nobody wants to think of themselves as deficient, broken, defective. Telling somebody that they've just done something that's wrong in that way by making them feel worse about it doesn't move them forward. Take yourself, for example. How do you move yourself forward? When you whether you're on a diet and you wanted to, and you had that extra piece of chocolate cake, you wanted to get up early to exercise, do you move forward by saying, I'm such a fool, I'm such an idiot, I'm so worthless, I'm nothing, I can't believe, or by saying, you know what? Okay, I'm a human being. I fell down. I have my goal. Let me get back up, dust myself off, and come up with a plan to move myself forward. See, here's the thing. We don't realize, by the way, sometimes how we speak to ourselves. The tone of voice we use when we talk to ourselves is mean. It's belligerent, bombastic. You use enough big words, people think you're smart, because this bookcase isn't going to convince anyone. When you talk to yourself, be nice. We don't realize the language, the tone of voice, and it's the reason why we bring it up now, because the same thing as we speak to somebody else. Telling ourselves we're awful, we're lousy for doing something doesn't move us forward and doesn't improve the relationship. How about the next time, for a practical takeaway, that you speak to somebody else, you speak to yourself, note 2 things, the message and the tone of voice. Make the message positive, we'll talk about that, and make the tone of voice gentle, kind. The research finds, by the way, that how a conversation begins is how it ends. It is John Gottman who actually did the research on this, and he found that 94% of conversations will end the way that they begin, meaning if you bring it up in a soft, loving, compassionate tone, whether you're talking to yourself or somebody else, it's likely to be a more productive conversation. But sometimes we think that the more angry we are, then our voice, the tone of our voice has to be commensurate with that. People don't listen. Other people don't listen. Children don't listen. We don't listen to ourselves when we scream. The brain just shuts down. Be focused on the message and speak in a kind and gentle voice. Okay, now, in the next week, we're going to talk about what that message looks like. If you can't criticize, if you can't critique, if you can't say something negative, how on earth do you ever move someone else's behavior forward? Now, we know piling on the guilt and shame is useless. It doesn't work with ourselves, doesn't work with our kids, doesn't work with our spouse, doesn't work with anybody. So what then is the mechanism in order to allow this person to be able to hear the message regardless of how sensitive they are, even irrespective of sometimes the relationship, and to be able to hear it in a way that they can accept without being mad at you, without being mad at themselves, and without compounding the guilt. And we'll do that next time. Have a beautiful week, and thanks for watching.